Well, Dr. Omar Bertov, a leading Holocaust and genocide scholar at Brown University, has just made a devastating declaration. After months of examining Israel's actions in Gaza, he says plainly Israel is committing genocide against the Palestinian people. And this is not coming from an outsider. Bartov is Israeli. He was raised in a Zionist home. He served in the IDF as a soldier and officer and has spent decades studying war crimes and the Holocaust. And he says, he resisted this conclusion for as long as he could, but, quote, I can recognize one when I see one. He goes on to say, my inescapable conclusion has become that Israel is committing genocide against the Palestinian people. He explains, by May 2024, the Israel Defense Forces had ordered about 1 million Palestinians sheltering in Rafah to move to the beach area of Mawasi, where there was little to no shelter. The army then proceeded to destroy much of Rafah, a feat mostly accomplished by August. So what made him change his mind on all of this? He says, at that point, it appeared no longer possible to deny that the pattern of IDF operations was consistent with the statements denoting genocidal intent made by Israeli leaders. So the Israeli leaders were talking like genocidal maniacs, and then the actions of the IDF supported the claim. So it's not genocide if there's no intent being spewed by the leaders, but then you see a lot of destruction going on the ground. They would say, well, we don't have proof of intent. And they could also say, yeah, that's just rhetoric. The Israeli leaders can say all of these genocidal things all they want, but actions speak louder than words. And he's saying, well, actually, they said a lot of genocidal things and their actions supported the genocidal statements. He says, he quoted the Prime Minister Netanyahu saying the enemy would pay a huge price, and he promised to turn parts of Gaza into rubble. Netanyahu also invoked a chilling biblical reference when he said, remember what Amalek did to you, a line many interpret as a call for genocide because it's kill alike men and women, infants and sucklings, so even the babies should die. Other Israeli officials called Palestinians human animals and later called for total annihilation. One deputy speaker of parliament even said the mission was erasing the Gaza Strip from the face of the earth. So Bartov writes, Israel's actions could be understood only as the implementation of the expressed intent to make the Gaza Strip uninhabitable for its Palestinian population. And he continues, I believe the goal was and remains today to force the population to leave the Strip altogether or to debilitate the enclave through bombings and severe deprivation of food, clean water, sanitation, and medical aid to such an extent that it is impossible for Palestinians in Gaza to maintain or reconstitute their existence as a group. And then Bartov reminds us that the crime of genocide was defined in 1948 by the United Nations as the intent to destroy in whole or in part a national, ethnic, racial, or religious group as such. And he goes on to say, and in Israel's case, that intent has been publicly expressed by numerous officials and leaders, but intent can also be derived from a pattern of operations on the ground. And this pattern became clear by May of 2024 and has since become ever clearer as the IDF has systematically destroyed the Gaza Strip. Here's what the destruction looks like. And these numbers are pretty appalling that he quotes, quote, more than 58,000 people have been killed, including more than 17,000 children. More than 870 of those children were less than a year old. Over 174,000 buildings have been destroyed or damaged. And Gaza now has the highest number of amputee children per capita in the world. So a lot of children haven't died. A lot of children have died. But a lot of children have just been maimed and are missing limbs now. Children missing limbs. Do you think those kids are going to grow up and be like, let's just live in harmony with the Jews? Do you think they're going to be like, oh, Jews are wonderful people, we love them? No, they're what they know is that the Jewish nation, the nation for Jews, has attacked them, killed their families, and left them without limbs. I mean, that's the only thing these kids know. They're not going to grow up and be friendly. Bartov says, this is not just war. Today, the IDF is primarily engaged in an operation of demolition and ethnic cleansing. Even Netanyahu's own former defense minister, Moshe Yaalon, called it, quote, the attempt to clear northern Gaza of its population. And when some try to label it as ethnic cleansing, instead of genocide. Bartov responds, well, when an ethnic group has nowhere to go and is constantly displaced from one so-called safe zone to another, relentlessly bombed and starved, ethnic cleansing can morph into genocide. And he concludes with this warning, not just to Israel, but to the world. And he says, as Israel is literally trying to wipe out Palestinian existence in Gaza, the moral and historical credit which the Jewish state has drawn on until now is running out. The study and remembrance of the Holocaust could lose its claim to be concerned with universal justice and retreat into the same ethnic ghetto in which it began its life, an ethnically specific event before it succeeded to find its rightful place as a lesson and a warning for humanity as a whole. That's why we study the Holocaust, right? We study the Holocaust not just so that we could say, poor Jews and let's do whatever the Jews need or want. That's not why we study the Holocaust. We study the Holocaust and we do say poor Jews. How did they end up this way? How did that happen? And what we learn is when a group of people is demonized and dehumanized, then another group that's more powerful and has bigger military and weapons and the means and the ability, they can come along and treat that group of people like they are subhuman parasites that should be exterminated. That is why we learn about the Holocaust. It isn't just so that we can be with one group and just have sympathy for one group and one group only. It isn't just to breed sympathy for Jews and only Jews and that's it. And then now they can just get away with anything, kind of like the mom who, you see this all the time with families where they feel guilty about something. And so then they're like, spoil them. And then you spoil them rotten until they're just awful. Right. And that's not the point of the Holocaust and why we learn about it. It's not so that we just spoil Jews, for example. The point is to learn about it so that we could say never again for anybody, not just for one group of people, but for anybody. And his final hope, he says, that a new generation of Israelis will face their future without sheltering in the shadow of the Holocaust and finally come to terms with the inescapable need for its 7 million Jewish citizens to share the land with the 7 million Palestinians in peace. Equality and dignity, that will be the only just reckoning. So he came to that conclusion that the only just reckoning on this is we're just going to have to share the land, meaning it can no longer be a Jewish nation. The idea of the ethnocentric nation just for Jews has to go because it is creating, and it shouldn't be surprising to anybody because why did the Holocaust happen? Wasn't that also a ethnically motivated desire for one type of people to live in one land and for others to be expelled? And it wasn't just Jews who were harmed during World War II, right? It was gypsies and Romanians. There's plenty of other people who were viewed as not one of us, and they have to go. And that is what happens when you try to create an ethno-nation. It's one thing. Now people will say, well, what about Japan? Japan's an ethno-nation. If you're already an ethno-nation, that's one thing. It can still be very, you could reel into a dark place by trying to maintain that ethnocentric nationality or national identity, but that's to be debated, I suppose. But certainly if you have visions of an ethnic nation, an ethnocentric nation, and there are already other people there, and in fact, for the longest time, the Palestinians outnumbered the Jews. And so if you're thinking you're going to get rid of the majority of the people there, then and you end up gaining the ability to do it, that is the recipe for a genocide. It shouldn't be a shock to anybody at all. It's nice to see that there are people changing. I mean, this is a Holocaust or a genocide scholar, and in that Omar Bartov and he was in support of Israel at first and was reluctant to come to the conclusion that this is a genocide, but he has finally come to that conclusion, and we've seen that happen to a few other people as well. Shael Ben Ephraim, who's been on this show numerous times, we've seen his evolution where he started off coming on the show saying and debating, hey, this is not a genocide, this is not ethnic cleansing, this is just a war, and this is how war happens, and this is what war looks like. And then the next time he came on and he says, okay, yeah, Israel's committing some war crimes. They shouldn't be doing that. There's some things that they're not conducting, they're not conducting themselves always properly on the battlefield. And then he's now come to a point where he is very vocally and fiercely calling out Israel, saying this is a genocide and it has to stop. And he has gone further and further into that. This is genocide. And yeah, I mean, he just keeps saying that over and over, and very he's become much more vocal about that. And so some people are changing their minds. Some people are changing their tune on this, but a lot of people aren't. And I think a big question is how many people are changing their minds. We're seeing a big battle within the Republican base. A lot of people, most Democrats look at it and say, yes, this is a genocide. And not most, well, I don't know the percentage of Republicans, to be honest with you. There's such a divide right now in the Republican Party between the elites and the big, pro-Zionist, pro-Israel influencers versus the pro-MAGA, America First people. It's really unclear where they're at, but there's certainly a divide going on there. So a lot of people are starting to look at this and say, yeah, this is a genocide, and I don't want to support that. I think I learned about this in school. I learned about the Holocaust in school so that if I were in that situation, I would say, I would speak up. I would fight against this. I think all of us, when we read about the Holocaust, thought, what would I do in that situation? And all of us asked the question, how could people end up this way? How could people end up doing that to another group of people? And we're literally witnessing it right in front of our own eyes. And the big question is, where do you stand on this? Are you a person that supports genocide, or are you not? Are you one of those people? How you are right now, regards to the Palestinian people, is exactly how you would have been during World War II and the Holocaust. That's just, and it's been heartbreaking to have friends and family and people I love take the wrong side on this. And I'm sure that's exactly what happened. And it was absolutely no different during World War II. I want to play for you this video clip. This is an Israeli widow. Her husband, she was newly married, and her husband, Abraham Azulai, was killed in Gaza, fighting against the Palestinians. And she eulogized him. So her eulogy is obviously in Hebrew, but just read the captions, and just, I mean, I get she's grieving, she's crying, she's grieving, but read the words that she says. And this is just one of those unfortunate showcasing of genocidal mentality that has been baked into the Israeli population. Watch this.
אברהם היה אחד, היית איש גדול שעושה דברים גדולים, לא פחדת מכלום, היית כל כך מאושר במשימה שלך, האמנת בה, וכל הזמן הזה ניסית לשכנע אותי להאמין גם. כל יום שהיית חוזר מעזה לישון איתי, היית מספר לי כמה בתים הרסת היום, ושאתם מתקדמים מאוד במשימה לסיים את המלחמה הזאת. הייתם מוכן למות כדי שהמלחמה הזאת תסתיים כבר. אני אומרת לכם, תסיימו כבר את המלחמה הזאת, תסיימו אותה. כמה שיותר מהר תכבשו את עזה. אין במקום לרוע טהור שרואה את האיש הכי יפה בעולם ופשוט מחליט לראות בו. אין מקום לרוע הזה שם. יש במקום רק לחיים, לצחוק של ילדים, לשמחה, למשפחות יהודיות וקדושות שחיות בשביל לחיות, שמתרגשות מכל גרגר באדמה הזאת. אתה נלחמת על הארץ הזאת, ומגיע לך לדעת שבסוף כבשו את הרצועה המסריחה הזאת. אנחנו נקים שם חווה, ואנחנו נקום שם. אני מבטיחה לך. מאמי כל כך אהבת את הארץ, וחלמת ליישב אותה בחווה שלנו.
And she wasn't the only one. I mean, in the family that got up there and said genocidal statements. Practically everybody who eulogized him made genocidal statements in one way or the other. And I don't think she realized she was making genocidal statements. She's there, she's crying. I feel for her that she's grieving. She's lost a loved one. But you would think that by her losing her spouse, she would have sympathy for the Palestinian people who've lost members of their family as well. Rather than saying, I've lost my husband, this is horrible and the worst feeling in the world, and I feel for the women in Gaza who've lost their husbands, and the husbands who've lost their wives, and the wives who've lost their children, and the children who've lost their mothers. And rather than saying, this is a horrible war for peace, I hope that we can all just have peace and live together so no more killing and no one ever has to feel this way again. That's not what this woman says. And that's not what any other member of his family said when they got up there as they're grieving his death. Rather than saying, this is horrible and no one should have to go through this, they just spewed genocidal rhetoric. She says, every day you would tell me how many houses you destroyed. Like every day you'd come home and you'd tell me how many houses you destroyed. It was so great. Conquer Gaza. There's no place for evil there. There's only place for children and laughter, but only for Jews. I mean, that's what she says. For holy Jewish families, that's who should be living there. We're going to live there with our farm. We're going to conquer the land. We're going to take the land and we're going to live there with our farm. And that's what we're going to do. Because we love the land, like as if these Palestinians don't love their land. That's why they're fighting for it, right? But it's just, this is unfortunately a showcasing of the mentality of many Israelis unfortunately, the majority of Israelis have very genocidal rhetoric they just want to get rid of all the Palestinians, and they say it point blank. What other evidence do we need? I mean, what more do we need? We have the leaders, we have the people, we have the actual physical evidence of what is happening in Gaza. We've got now American leaders talking about moving all the Palestinians into one little area so that we could then deport them all to some other place, ethnically cleanse the land so that Trump can create some sort of a Gaza strip. Or a Trump strip in Gaza. He acts like it's just a real estate deal, which we'll talk about that in a second. But this is, Haaretz did a piece on this, that the defense minister says that the defense minister says Israel plans to concentrate all of Gaza's population in a humanitarian zone built on Rafah ruins. Israel Katz said the plan set for a proposed 60-day ceasefire in Gaza. So this is a supposed ceasefire deal, okay? The ceasefire deal would relocate 600,000 Palestinians after security checks and bar them from leaving. So putting them all in a concentration camp, saying this contradicts the IDF chief's Sunday claim that the population transfer and concentration isn't a goal of the offensive. But now he's saying, part of this plan is that we want to move them all into a camp, 600 people into a camp where they're concentrated. Isn't that a concentration camp? Well, I mean, what else is a concentration camp? Where did we get that actual term from? And here is, this is former Israeli ambassador Michael Oren defending the plan for Israel to forcibly transfer the 2 million Palestinians into a concentration camp. Watch this.
This week, we heard a plan, which you already alluded to, from the Israeli Defense Minister, Israel Katz, which explicitly says that he wanted to ask the IDF to build what he says is a humanitarian city, what many observers call camps, on the ruins of Rafah, a city itself already destroyed by the IDF, where he wants to forcibly move 600,000 people and eventually the entire population of the Gaza Strip. That would be a war crime, wouldn't it?
Not a war crime. I'm not a jurist, but I tell you that it does cohere with Donald Trump's vision of the future of Gaza.
Well, in which case Donald Trump would be accessory to a war crime.
Well, you're going to have to make that judgment. I'm not.
Well, let me tell you, under Article 49 of the Fourth Geneva Convention of 1949, quotes, individual or mass forcible transfers of protected persons from an occupied territory are prohibited regardless of their motive. It is very, very clear it would be a war crime.
Well, then you go to court with it. But I'm telling you, this is what's happening
all right, then.
in the field. I mean, I'm not here to make a judicial judgment. I'm telling you what's happening. And what's happening is, yes, the Israeli army has cleared out about 65% of the Gaza Strip. That program that Israel Katz is talking about, the defense minister would require 75%. So another 10% had to have to be cleared out. And then, the ball would be, if Hamas agreed to the ceasefire, then the ball would be in the president's court.
Mr. Oren, I mean, I understand, I know you're not representing the Israeli government and so on, but just the terms you're using, talking about clearing out the debris for the Riviera and so on. I mean, we're talking about 2 million people here. Can you understand that the way that we talk about these things, it sounds like we're rather indifferent to these people?
Not indifferent to these people, but we are in a war.
But there are rules to war. But there are rules to war, and Israel is repeatedly violating those rules. That plan, as I've just said, would clearly violate international law, international customary law, and the Geneva Convention.
Well, maybe you're a jurist, but I'm not. But I can
It's
tell you
very
this as an historian, you got to let me finish, okay? You did invite me on your show. As an historian, I'll tell you that those conventions in 1949 were designed to describe a situation between two warring countries where people wore uniforms. They do not correspond in any way to the reality that Israel faced October 7th or post-October 7th, which is dealing with a terrorist organization.
No, Mr. Oren, that is not true.
That was holding at that time 250 hostages, that was hiding beneath its own population and didn't care about its own population. It's hiding beneath hospitals, mosques, and schools. There's nothing in the Geneva Convention that addresses remotely.
So they can do what they want. Israel can just do what it wants.
No, on the contrary. Well,
apparently, according to you,
and there's tremendous criticism in this country right now.
According to you, they can move 2 million people to a camp from which they would not be allowed to leave, and that would be all right.
Did I say they can? I said they are. Okay, I said that
you wouldn't have a problem
that
with
it's moral, that it doesn't raise serious moral questions. It raises serious moral questions, but we're dealing in an area, even juridically, which is very gray. And it's not covered by
It's not gray, Mr. Oren. It's not, because it says clearly under Article 49 of an occupied territory. It's not talking about two states at war. It's talking about how states might choose
two countries at war, but not a country dealing with a terrorist organization.
No, that's not true. It is about populations. It is about populations, how a government treats populations even within its territory. It's not just about war against another state. It's very clear.
I see. At the end of World War II, the United States, the Allies, moved millions of Germans. Millions, okay? Not hundreds of thousands, but millions.
And that was before the Geneva Convention was signed in 1949.
Right. So this is an area, and that was war between two countries. That was war between two countries and with armies with uniforms. We're dealing with a juridical area that actually has no precedent. And certainly, even in military terms, it has no precedence, because we're dealing with an army, with an enemy here that not only hides behind a civilian population, it hides under the actual landscape of Gaza. 500 kilometers of terrorist tunnels. No army in history has ever encountered anything remotely like that.
I mean, he goes on and says, first of all, it's just hard to listen to this. It's hard to hear somebody, former ambassador, American, to Israel, basically justifying all of this. But one of the things that he says is that millions of Germans were relocated. But yeah, to Germany. Germany is still Germany for Germans. We didn't carve up Germany into places for everybody else other than Germans and concentrate all the Germans into little pockets of territories and say, well, this is your area and the rest is our area. I mean, yes, Germany was divided and controlled, but it was still Germany for Germans, and no one was disputing that, and it's still Germany for Germans today. But what they're trying to do is actually clear the Palestinians out. Also, for him to say Hamas hides behind underneath hospitals and mosques and schools and apartment buildings and whatever. I mean, they have not shown us one shred of evidence of that being true. They've made the claim over and over and over again. They've said there's a headquarters under this, there's a headquarters under that. There's been how many headquarters? I've lost count how many headquarters Hamas has. Hamas must be the most sophisticated military in the world to have so many headquarters, according to the Israelis. Headquarters everywhere, headquarters under your children's bed. That is what the Israelis have been saying this whole time, and never once have they given us a single shred of evidence that there was actually a headquarters under a single hospital, mosque, or school, or child's bed. Yet they continue to bomb all of it into oblivion, saying that they were just targeting the headquarters. Well, all of Gaza to them is the headquarters, because they view every single Palestinian as Hamas. I want to show you this. This is, shooting at an aid distribution center. When they concentrate all these people in, we've heard about all the reports of many people being killed at these food distribution centers. Last I checked, there's not a headquarters under this, but I'm sure the IDF will claim that there is. But you can see all the people gathered there trying to get food, and they're being shot at. The ground is being shot at. These are warning shots, or whatever you want to call it. Yet several hundred Palestinians have been killed now trying to get food from a distribution center. This is the type of life that they're trying to get them into. And then what would be the end game from this? Where would they go from here? Once they're concentrated into their camps, then what are you going to do with them? You're going to starve them to death, kill them? Or are you going to demand that every other country in the world take them because you don't want them on the land you claim to be yours, even though it's theirs? And here's Donald Trump. acting like it's just a bad real estate deal. This is just a real estate deal gone bad. That's what this whole Gaza thing is. Watch this.
And again, that was something I use. I use trade for a lot of things, but it's great for settling wars. That was really very important. Marco is working very hard with everybody here on the Strip, the Gaza Strip. I call it the Gaza Strip, one of the worst real estate deals ever made. They gave up the oceanfront property, one of the worst deals ever made. But it was supposed to bring peace, and it didn't bring peace. It brought the opposite. But we're doing pretty well on Gaza. Steve Witkoff is here, and I think we could have something fairly soon to talk about.
He acts like Israel had this land. It was their land. They did occupy it. They were there. There were settlements there. They were forced to get out of it because it was never their land to begin with. And in fact, the Gaza Strip, historically, a lot of people, even if you're in the camp of this is God's promised land to the Jews, and this land was for them, and so all these other people are Arab invaders or whatever. Actually, the Gaza Strip was never part of the promised land. If you're going to follow the biblical promised land, Gaza Strip was never actually part of that. It's never been occupied by Jews throughout the time of history. It was the Pharisees who had that region and other groups of people, but it hadn't been occupied by what, if you're going to go into the biblical stuff, say that the Jews were. Gaza Strip wasn't really part of that. Yet Trump is treating it like a bad real estate deal. Oh, they gave up that land when they were occupying it and controlling the people there and building settlements, just like they are in the West Bank. The Gaza at one point was very similar to the West Bank. And he's acting like, oh yeah, what a terrible deal, them giving it up. They shouldn't have ever given that up. What a bad deal. No, the whole deal for Palestinians has been a horrible real estate nightmare. In fact, not just a bad deal, an entire real estate nightmare for the Palestinian people who've lived on that land for centuries and centuries and centuries, only to be invaded and to have the mightiest military in the world, the United States, support it and supporting genocide. And it is, I think, for us Americans, we have to, at some point, I think many have come to the realization that we are on the wrong side of this, that we are supporting a genocide, that this is the worst nightmare many of us had when we were studying the Holocaust. We thought for sure that we were the good guys and we would be on the right side every time. And unfortunately, with this and what we're watching and the excuses that are being made and the destruction and the death and the maiming of children, a lot of people are waking up and realizing we are on the wrong side of this. And that is people on both sides of the aisle. That is a lot of Democrats. That's a lot of MAGA America First supporters. A lot of people are realizing we are on the wrong side of this. And now we're having some Israelis, not enough, but some of them also waking up and saying, wow, we are on the wrong side of this and things have to change. And my hope is more and more people wake up to this before it's too late. I hope that it doesn't take however long World War II took, however long it took for people to wake up to the atrocities of the Holocaust. I hope it doesn't take that long. But I also worry that it will. Hey guys, thank you for watching this clip from the full Kim Iversen Show, which you could check out Monday through Friday, 5 p.m. Eastern at KimIversonShow.com. See you there.